Personnel moves continue across the nation, and they involve USC football. We got Matt Zemek on the line from Trojans Wire to help us break it all down involving USC, UCLA, and across the Pac-12 in the nation. Matt, how you doing today?
We had the coaching carousel. Now we have the quarterback carousel, the transfer carousel. There's always some kind of carousel.
Absolutely. So we'll start with what we do know, and that's Jaxon Dart's in the transfer portal. Now, where he's going to land is anybody's guess, but there's a number of destinations that make sense, and one is obviously tied to Graham Harrell's move from USC to West Virginia.
Absolutely. And these moves came within a very short period of time. The two moves were not separated by a whole lot of time on Monday afternoon, late morning in Los Angeles. So that particular detail would lend a lot of credence to the notion that Jaxon Dart is going to follow Graham Harrell. And, when Jaxon Dart got the chance to play, he certainly showed his stuff against Washington State in September, and then at the end of the season in a very good game against BYU. Now, most people weren't paying attention to it because USC was so bad, and Bedlam had just ended. And ironically, the game that because Oklahoma lost, that opened the door for Lincoln Riley to go to USC because he didn't have to coach in the Big 12 championship game. But anyway, Jaxon Dart played really well against BYU. And so, his stock as a transfer portal quarterback is considerable. And the fact that Graham Harrell, boosted that stock, it certainly lends a lot of credence to the notion that he's going to go to West Virginia. So, we don't know for sure, but I would say West Virginia has to be the favorite at this point. And it brings up a fascinating scenario. So for your listeners, if you're not already aware, West Virginia and Pitt are bringing back the backyard brawl in 2022, and it's in week 1. And guess who's the quarterback for Pitt? Keaton Slovis, Jaxon Dart's former USC teammate. So you could have former USC quarterbacks going up against each other in week 1 in a big rivalry game with Graham Harrell being the coordinator on one side of that rivalry. That would be an absolutely amazing week 1 storyline. It would certainly spice up what is an always spicy backyard brawl whenever West Virginia and Pitt do manage to play each other in the same season. That would be great. That would be so great to see happen.
It would be phenomenal. It's a matchup that people in that part of the country, as you allude to, are already at a fever pitch about because they used to play every year and typically near the end of the season. Of course, the 2007 result when Pitt knocked West Virginia out of the national championship race with a 13-9 win is historic, but because of moving to different conferences, they've not played for roughly a decade, something in that range. So now they're going to get back together, and then we bring in the possible West Coast storyline with Keaton Slovis for sure on the Pitt side, and possibly Graham Harrell for sure, and now possibly Jaxon Dart playing on the West Virginia side in place of Jarret Doege, who's moving on in the transfer portal as well. Speaking of the transfer portal, I was a bit interested in the Jayden de Laura move from Washington State to Arizona, considering we're looking at the freshman offensive player of the year in the Pac-12, who seemed to be a candidate for a number of better destinations from a football standpoint, at least, that he's going to Arizona and Jedd Fisch.
Yeah, so, Jedd Fisch, he's certainly established a reputation as someone who can deliver the players, in terms of recruiting, in terms of the transfer portal. He has made a significant impact. I mean, he's flipped some Oregon commits, turned them to Tucson. I mean, that's pretty impressive in its own right. And now this, convincing Jayden de Laura to go from Washington State, which, let's keep in mind, Washington State almost won the Pac-12 North. Washington State already has contender status in the Pac-12 under Jake Dicker, the coach who did a very good job as the interim, taking over from Nick Rolovich last season. One would think that that's a pretty good situation. So for Jedd Fisch to be able to convince de Laura to come down to Tucson, I mean, it certainly has that Mac Brown, sell snow to Eskimos type feel to it. But now, of course, the question with Jedd Fisch is, can he coach him up on game day? That's obviously the lingering question. But just to kind of stick with this Delora situation a little bit, I can't help but wonder if the Sun Bowl, when Washington State lost to Central Michigan, Delora got benched midway through that game, and it was his backup who led a Washington State rally in the second half. It fell short, but Washington State at least did something on offense in the second half without Delora on the field. Did that benching represent the moment when Delora mentally said, Washington State's not the program for me? It seems as though the sun set on his desire to stay in Pullman in that Sun Bowl game.
Matt, this is just one of many reasons why we have you on. I checked out at 21-0 Central Michigan, so I didn't even know Delora got benched. And yeah, they made it a game at 24-21 against Central Michigan in the Sun Bowl.
I watched the Washington State Central Michigan games of the world so that you don't have to.
There we go. I'm usually that guy, Matt, but you even take it to another degree.
Well, but like we've just been through a season where you and I have had these conversations where, like I have to be the guy watching those dumpy USC games because you were focused on Michigan, Ohio State, and, the important things. So like that's the division of labor around here. I have to scrounge around. You focus on the elite games, as you should, as the voice of college football. I got the Pac-12 locked down here.
I really never thought we would get to a point, even in that 5-7 USC season in 2018, we would get to a point where USC pretty much, in my dealings with the viewers and fans every day, pretty much sleptwalked through a season that nobody noticed.
Yeah, it's the most uneventful season ever, and we had this particular conversation too. That USC won only one game in 1957, won only two games in the early in a season in the early 1950s, went 3-9 under Larry Smith, or 3-8, I should say, under Larry Smith, circa 1991 or 1992, one of those years. And yet, those seasons were still competitive, but this was a year in which USC regularly got blasted and games were over 5 minutes into the third quarter. It really was the most uneventful season for a high-profile program that I can ever remember. Just so few games were dramatic. At least Nebraska, as a point of contrast, lost a lot of games, but always competitive. But USC lost a lot of games and was rarely, if ever, competitive. It was the most unusual season, but we sure got the payoff in the coaching carousel and Lincoln Riley. So USC fans, it was a very easy way to forget about everything that transpired from September through Thanksgiving Day, and then Thanksgiving weekend brought manna from heaven with Lincoln Riley.
So the antithesis of this uneventful regular season has been the off season that's been full go all the time, starting with Lincoln Riley moving from Oklahoma to LA. All right, to bring this full circle, we were talking about Jedd Fisch a few minutes ago, the former offensive coordinator at UCLA. Well, of course, Caleb Williams, we're expecting to make a move to USC, or at least I was, and tons of people out there, but it's not necessarily 100% guarantee.
Yeah, ESPN's Kyle Bonagura, the fine Pac-12 reporter for ESPN, he's noted that, and he noted on Wednesday, I should specify, that Caleb Williams has still been talking to UCLA and among other schools. So I think he's just still wants to just consider his options. I would obviously make USC the favorite, but just the fact that he's talking to UCLA, there's a story there, Mark. And the story is that if Chip Kelly really is on his way out at UCLA because his buyout goes to zero this upcoming Sunday, January 16th, if he really was on his way out, would he be talking to Caleb Williams? Would Caleb Williams, be courting him? It seems very unlikely. And we also had the news earlier this week that Jerry Azzanaro, the UCLA's embattled defensive coordinator, resigned. And one would has to first think, Mark, why didn't Chip Kelly just fire him when the regular season ended? Like, he knew that this was the weak link on his coaching staff, and that if there was any question about Chip Kelly's job security for 2022, should have made that move right away. So why did it happen this long? So was this a UCLA move going over Chip Kelly's head and being the kind of the lead in to a firing this Sunday with the buyout going to zero? Or was this a case of Chip Kelly being in a negotiating stalemate with UCLA and finally conceding, okay, I have to let this guy go, in order to save my job. So the Caleb Williams news that he's still talking with UCLA this week, not just last week, but this week, it would certainly seem to point to Chip Kelly and UCLA being in the process of arriving at an extension that will keep Chip Kelly at UCLA at least in 2022, if not another year. That's really the big news with Caleb Williams talking to UCLA. Not that he's going to land there, because Dorian Thompson-Robinson just said he was going to return for this season. But the significance is that if UCLA's coaching staff really was about to be completely axed, if there was a full house cleaning about to occur, it would not, Caleb Williams would not be meeting with UCLA, one would think. So one should expect that in the coming days, you're going to see UCLA make an announcement that it's extended Chip Kelly. Obviously, nothing has happened right now as you and I talk, but that should be the expectation. And that's really the real significance of the Caleb Williams UCLA discussions.
Do you think that with DTR coming back to UCLA, that is pretty much all we need to know about the Caleb Williams situation and his decision between USC and UCLA?
Absolutely. And in terms of UCLA, I mean, like, the quarterback room is not the biggest concern now that DTR has decided to stay. And in this defensive coordinator hire that Chip Kelly is going to make, at least presuming that he's going to be retained, and it appears that he will be, he has to find somebody really good, because now you're going up against Lincoln Riley's USC offense, not Clay Helton's, or Lincoln Riley's USC offense, not Clay Helton's USC offense. So, like, the bar has already been raised for Chip Kelly, and now that he's been forced to fire his underperforming defensive coordinator, well, he better come up with something good. So that's going to be a major story to watch as January continues.
And again, the Caleb Williams decision is believed to also be linked to the Mario Williams decision, a high 4-star in the 2021 class, top 50 national player who caught 35 passes for OU this past season. Matt,
absolutely. So USC is getting a 2-for-1 here, and keep in mind USC already has gotten a 2-for-1 by getting Zion Branch for the class of 2022, and then Zachariah Branch for 2023. That was a 2-for-1 package. Now, Caleb Williams and Mario Williams, they're not related. They're not brothers. But nevertheless, it is expected that it's a 2-for-1. Whoever is able to get Caleb is also going to get Mario.
All right, everyone. Matt Zemek on the line, Trojans Wire. You can hear the obvious insight, information. Please lock in on his perspective on USC football in the Pac-12 there. Again, Matt Zemek, Trojans Wire. Matt, we always appreciate the conversation. It's always a good time. We learn so much from you, so we appreciate you being here.
Always fun. Have a great weekend coming up.